Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're opening a set of historical documents that give us an unprecedented and, frankly, just profoundly disturbing view into the absolute coldest calculation of American slavery.
Hmm.
This isn't about the general horrors, which were immense, obviously. This is a meticulous look at a specific, systematic family enterprise, the Jessup Plantation breeding operation in Wilkinson County, Mississippi.
It really is a chilling dive. It shows how cold, calculated business practice could just completely overtake any semblance of human morality.
And the source material is key here, right?
Absolutely. Our primary sources today, and what makes this case so uniquely documented, are the Jessup Ledgers themselves. These records, they span 3 decades, 1835 right through to 1865.
Wow.
And they give precise details, the kind usually reserved for agricultural inventories or livestock records.
Okay, let's unpack this then, because our mission today is pretty stark. We need to extract the cold, hard operational details of how an entire family, Isaiah, Ruth, their sons, and their daughters, participated in forced reproduction, systematically, for 2 decades.
And it's crucial to understand this wasn't driven by, individual perversion or just random acts of cruelty. This was purely a methodical, multi-generational business plan.
Designed simply to maximize their generational wealth in just the most horrific way imaginable.
That's it. And what's truly critical, I think, is that the Ledgers transformed this horror from scattered anecdotes, which we hear about elsewhere, into verifiable policy. This wasn't chaos.
Yeah.
This was corporate efficiency, basically, applied to human beings. The Jessup family, they convinced themselves they were being good stewards of their resources, recording forced births, separations, with the same chilling precision you'd use for tracking cotton yields or cattle rotations.
And the community around them.
Well, the surrounding community, just by choosing silence, by looking away, was entirely complicit. They allowed this systematic enterprise to just flourish right under their noses.
So to really get how this level of horror could be so systematic, we have to start with the economics, the foundation of it all. We're in Wilkinson County, Mississippi, 1835, prime cotton country. You've got this incredibly rich delta soil where fortunes could be made almost overnight.
Yeah, huge potential.
And the Jessup Plantation, it wasn't small. It sprawled across 12,200 acres, about 8 miles northeast of Woodville, already a vast enterprise.
And then you look at the architects of this system.
Yeah.
First, Isaiah Jessup. He's 31 years old in 1835.
Okay.
He'd bought the land just a few years earlier, 1829, using inheritance from his father. And his father was a Virginia tobacco merchant.
Ah, so that background matters.
It does, because that fortune was built on generations of profitable, if brutal, commerce. And the sources, they reveal Isaiah was a man obsessed with account books, costs, projections, optimizing returns.
He saw everything as a calculation.
Pretty much, yes. He
Yeah.
approached life like an ongoing balance sheet.
And then there's his partner in this, his wife, Ruth Candish Jessup. She's only 23 at this point.
Right. And she wasn't just, a typical planter's wife decorating the parlor. She was educated in Charleston, came from a South Carolina family that ran an enormous rice plantation.
Okay. And rice plantations, especially in the Low Country, they had their own brutal systems, didn't they?
Exactly. They were historically among the first to really systematize labor allocation and, yes, reproduction, partly because of the demanding, swampy conditions and the high mortality rates. Ruth understood the granular economics of slavery thoroughly.
So back to Isaiah in 1835. He's got this land, but he has a problem.
A critical financial problem. He owned 42 enslaved people at that point. A solid base, sure, but his cotton operation was growing, and it demanded more labor than he had.
And buying more people was getting expensive.
Hugely expensive. He was plagued by the rising cost. The documents show a healthy adult male field worker could cost anywhere from $800 to $1,200.
Which was a fortune back then.
A colossal figure. Maybe half a year's gross income from a smaller cotton farm. And then, if workers died or got too old to work effectively, that's $1,000, maybe $1,200 just gone. An investment lost.
So the acquisition cost was really hurting his growth plans.
Crippling his projections, according to his notes.
And this is where Ruth's background comes in.
This seems to be the turning point. She brought the idea, likely something she saw or learned about on her father's rice plantation, that growing your own workforce. Well, it wasn't just profitable.
It was the key.
It was seen as the only way to achieve true long-term self-sufficiency, to insulate the plantation from those volatile market costs for buying people.
But it required management.
Systematic pairing and management, yes, to ensure the labor supply replaced itself, and then some. I mean, forced reproduction was sadly common everywhere.
But this was different.
The Jessups were about to turn it into an industrialized, meticulously documented policy.
So when did they actually formalize this horrific idea?
The initial proposal seems to have been formalized during the severe winter of 1834. Ruth was actually pregnant with their daughter Margaret at the time.
And Isaiah proposed direct involvement by the Jessup family members themselves.
Yes. And the logic he laid out, which we can see traces of in his financial notes, it's just chillingly economic. He noted the children born would be enslaved, of course, following the mother's legal condition.
Right.
But because they would carry Jessup blood, he genuinely believed they would be, quote, stronger, healthier, and crucially, more valuable property.
More valuable.
He literally speculated they'd command a premium if sold later, or simply be more productive workers if kept on the plantation.
That's just an incredible twisting of morality. Did he really write about this, like to business partners?
Absolutely. His business letters copies exist. He talks about improving the stock in the same way he discusses improving the quality of his seed cotton.
Good Lord.
He writes that by introducing new vigor, as he put it, they could mitigate the risk of buying, disease-prone or weaker individuals from the coastal markets. It's framed entirely as calculated risk management.
And Ruth, what was her reaction? Because her agreement seems central to making this a multi-generational nightmare.
It was the key. After weeks of consideration, and look, she wasn't just preying on it. She was cross-referencing this against the cost columns in those account books.
She agreed.
She agreed. But she insisted on one condition, a crucial one. Their own children must be raised knowing this was their fundamental duty.
Not a secret sin, but a family responsibility.
Exactly. This had to be a multi-generational family enterprise, explicitly designed to maximize production. It couldn't be hidden away. It had to be taught as a core family value.
A contract of horror. That just sets the stage for everything that followed.
It really does. It locked in the destruction of the family's moral compass for decades. So once Isaiah and Ruth set that foundational policy, the next critical phase was, normalization, making this seem normal to their own children.
The indoctrination process.
Precisely. The Jessup children, Thomas, Samuel, Daniel, Margaret, and Elizabeth, they were prepared for their roles from the earliest age, starting with the eldest, Thomas, who was born in 1831.
And how did they do that? How do you make something like this seem normal to a child?
Language was the primary tool. At the dinner table, around the house, enslaved people were discussed openly. Not as people, but as property, as investments.
Oh, I see.
They used specific terms like prime producers or talked about asset optimization. It was the exact same terminology they used when discussing their best draft horses or their cattle herd.
So dehumanizing language constantly reinforced.
Constantly. Thomas was only 3 when this really started. And by the time he was 8 in 1839, the ledgers actually show he was already accompanying his father to the slave quarters. He understood, at least implicitly, what was expected of him down the line.
And how is it framed differently for the sons versus the daughters?
Well, Isaiah framed participation for his sons, Thomas, Samuel, and Daniel, not as something sordid or taboo, but as a son's essential duty.
A responsibility.
Exactly. It was presented as a definitive mark of maturity, proving they were ready to contribute meaningfully to the growing family enterprise. Viewing it through that lens of business continuity helped make the act seem neutral, almost sterile in their minds.
And the daughters, Margaret and Elizabeth. How did Ruth frame it for them?
That was handled specifically by Ruth. Her letters, some survive, reveal a really chilling rationale. She taught them that bearing children was, a woman's highest purpose.
Okay, a common sentiment then, maybe.
But she added the twist. Doing so to increase family wealth and secure the future of the Jessup name was paramount. The idea of using enslaved women, or men in the daughter's case, was framed as no different from using any other tool or resource on the plantation.
Just like ordering someone to cook or clean.
Or harvest cotton, exactly. It was just a different form of labor extraction, reproductive labor managed for profit. Slavery had already dehumanized the individuals in the eyes of the law and society. The Jessups just found a new, specialized function for that dehumanized status.
And did they keep the children isolated to prevent outside ideas?
Incredibly isolated, yes. They had very few outside friends whose different values might challenge the Jessup norms. Their private tutor, a man named Charles Whitfield from Kentucky, he lived right there on the property.
And he just went along with it.
He taught the standard subjects reading, writing, arithmetic, scripture. But his presence served another purpose. He never, ever challenged Isaiah's moral or operational authority. His silence, year after year, served as a kind of tacit approval. It suggested that what the family was doing fell within the bounds of, acceptable Christian civilized behavior.
So the tutor's silence reinforced the normalization.
Deeply.
And what about the wider community? Woodville, did people suspect?
It's hard to imagine they didn't notice something, but outwardly to Woodville, the Jessups were seen as just a successful, respectable planter family. Very prosperous.
They maintained appearances.
Oh, yes. They were active in the Woodville Presbyterian congregation. Isaiah even served on the county agricultural board. No one intervened because the social conventions of the antebellum South fiercely protected the privacy of a man's property.
Property, including people.
Including people. Even if neighbors noticed the, let's say, rapidly expanding, often lighter-skinned child population in the quarters, they looked away. It was considered perfectly acceptable to ask about cotton yields or land purchases.
But not about how a man managed his labor force.
Never. That was off limits, considered his private business.
Okay, so this is where we move from the planning and indoctrination phase to actual implementation. And this is where the records become terrifyingly concrete, isn't it?
Absolutely. The system formally began on a humid May evening in 1848. That was the month Thomas, the eldest son, turned 17.
The age of maturity in their eyes.
Right. He was called into the study by Isaiah, given his instructions, and a 20-year-old kitchen worker named Hannah was selected for him.
And the ledgers document this.
The entries around this event are profoundly revealing in their coldness. Thomas, thoroughly prepared, did not refuse. He viewed it entirely as an expected duty.
Just like his father taught him.
Just so. Hannah became pregnant quickly, within about 3 months. She gave birth to a boy, Isaac, in May 1849. And Isaiah recorded the birth with chilling satisfaction.
What did he write?
Simply noted, Isaac, property of Jessup Plantation, estimated value at age 5, $500.
$500.
And Hannah, she was returned to her kitchen work within 2 weeks. Isaac was handed over to the care of Claudia, that older woman we mentioned, who was responsible for managing the infants in the nursery cabin.
So Isaiah treated the whole thing like farming.
Exactly like agriculture or animal husbandry. He was relentless in his meticulous management, tracking everything for maximum efficiency.
Like what specifically?
Well, the ledgers show he tracked menstrual cycles. He meticulously rotated which enslaved women were paired with his sons.
Rotated them, what?
To avoid what he clinically called overuse or diminishing returns, preventing too many pregnancies too close together for one woman, purely to maintain her long-term reproductive capacity.
Can you give an example from the ledger?
Yeah. There are specific notations in the margins. For instance, next to the name of one woman, Rachel, after she had borne 2 children in 3 years, there's a note. Cycle 4, resting period initiated. Assigned to light garden duties.
Wow. That shows not just tracking, but active intervention, managing their bodies for future productivity.
Purely for that reason. He also provided better food rations to pregnant women.
Okay, but I'm guessing not out of kindness.
Explicitly not. The ledgers meticulously tracked the cost of these higher rations, more protein, better grains, against the potential loss of investment if a child was born sickly or frail.
It was a cost-benefit analysis.
Entirely. The calculation showed the, say, $5 increase in weekly food costs was negligible compared to the $500 future value of a healthy infant. It was just good business practice to him.
And then there was the separation policy. That sounds particularly brutal.
Perhaps the cruelest policy, designed purely to optimize for future sales and productivity. The Jessup policy dictated that mothers and children were separated, specifically at age 3.
Age 3, why then?
Isaiah believed, and likely Ruth agreed, that this early separation prevented the formation of deep emotional bonds that might interfere with a child's future assignment to harsh field labor or complicate a future sale if the mother became distressed.
So they calculated the economic benefit of inflicting emotional trauma.
It eliminated the potential cost of emotional resistance later on. It's just an astounding level of cold-blooded efficiency.
And this policy, this whole system, it applied across the entire family.
It became the family's operational standard. The second son, Samuel, he began his participation right on schedule, age 17 in 1850. Daniel, the youngest son, started in 1854.
And the daughters, too.
Equally involved. Margaret, at age 18 in 1853, she was prepared by Ruth and then paired with Jacob. Jacob was a 25-year-old enslaved blacksmith on the plantation.
Was he chosen for a reason?
Oh, absolutely. He wasn't chosen randomly. The notes indicate he was selected specifically for his desirable physical characteristics, his strength, his excellent health records, again, furthering that perverse genetic goal. Margaret gave birth in August 1854.
And Elizabeth, the youngest daughter.
She followed the exact same horrific pattern when she turned 18 in 1857. It was completely normalized, not just for the Jessup boys, but for the Jessup women as well, to use the enslaved population as reproductive vehicles for family wealth.
And Isaiah himself, did he participate directly?
We cannot forget the architect himself. Yes, Isaiah began his own direct participation in 1850, and children he fathered were marked with a chillingly specific notation in the ledger.
What was that?
J direct line.
Jessup direct line.
Correct. He believed these specific children, his direct offspring, would command the highest price due to that direct genetic link to him, the owner. Or, if kept, they might demonstrate superior loyalty or capacity for work.
So by his own twisted metrics, the system was working.
Overwhelmingly. By 1855, just 7 years into the official program, starting with Thomas, the plantation population grew dramatically, from 42 people to 68 individuals. Think about that increase. They had successfully generated 26 new laborers internally.
And avoiding the open market saved him a fortune.
A huge amount of capital he didn't have to spend. Based on the prices at the time, somewhere between, say, $20,800 and maybe $31,200 in purchasing costs avoided.
Which allowed him to expand.
Exactly. The Ledgers correlate this population growth directly with a subsequent major acquisition. He purchased 300 adjacent acres of prime land, and he constructed new outbuildings, including the very cotton gin that would later play such a critical role in the plantation's collapse.
So if the Ledgers track the system's precision from the Jessup's perspective, the oral histories and the silences in the record tell the story of the pain on the other side.
Yes, the psychological impact on the enslaved community was just profound. It was a life lived in constant, inescapable fear.
Knowing anyone could be chosen.
Any woman could be selected at any moment. And knowing that any child born under this program would be seized at age 3. Guaranteed to be ripped away.
Who cared for all these infants and toddlers?
The burden of care fell largely onto the enslaved community itself. We see that recurring name, Claudia, the older woman who managed dozens of infants and toddlers over the years.
She became a reluctant caretaker.
Desperately attempting to provide some small semblance of maternal comfort in a system specifically designed to destroy all familial bonds. She was the human buffer against that ultimate dehumanization.
Was there resistance? There must have been attempts to resist.
There was. But resistance, even passive nonverbal forms, was met with crushing retribution. We have the tragic story of Sarah.
What happened to her?
She had borne 3 children, fathered by Samuel, the second son. In 1851, she attempted to run away. She only made it about 17 miles before being caught.
And the punishment?
She was brought back, publicly whipped, severely, and then confined for 2 weeks. But the most revealing detail in the records isn't the punishment itself, it's what happened after.
Tell me.
She subsequently stopped speaking, entirely. For 12 years, from 1851 until she died of pneumonia in 1863, she never uttered another word.
Complete silence.
This silent refusal to communicate, to acknowledge her captors. It was a profound, daily protest. The oral histories gathered later revealed that the community saw this silence as a manifestation of the trauma inflicted. A quiet, immovable resistance against a world that had stolen her voice, her children, everything.
And did external pressures ever make things worse inside the plantation?
Oh, definitely. The pressures of the cotton economy could exacerbate the internal horror. In 1858, there was a severe boll weevil infestation.
Bad for the cotton crop.
Devastating. It caused the crop to suffer dramatically, putting huge financial pressure on Isaiah. And his solution, once again, was purely economic.
He needed cash.
Immediately. So he liquidated some of his newer property. He sold 6 children, aged between 8 and 12, most likely fathered by his sons Thomas and Samuel, to a slave trader heading down to Louisiana.
Sold the children.
The Ledgers note this transaction with a price point per head, just cold numbers. And the oral histories confirm they were separated without ceremony, without warning, just taken away. This act of cashing in on his human capital, it just intensified the internal rage building within the quarters.
Could a program this systematic really stay hidden from the children born into it, especially as they got older?
No, not forever. By 1857, children who were 8 or 9 years old, they started noticing things. Physical differences, lighter skin, different hair texture compared to children born of 2 enslaved parents.
And they asked questions.
They must have. The older enslaved people, very carefully and quietly, began telling them the truth about their parentage. in the relative privacy of the quarters.
Fueling resentment.
Profound resentment and tension, directed not just at Isaiah, the architect, but at the entire Jessup family line, including the children's own half-siblings in the main house.
We mentioned the tutor earlier, Charles Whitfield. His silence was complicit.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We have to address his role. He lived on that property for over 20 years. He was an educated man. He taught the Jessup children scripture, no less. And he saw, with his own eyes, the increasing number of mixed-race children, children who resembled his pupils.
But he said nothing.
His long-term silence was a crucial component of the normalization. His sudden death in February 1858, at age 57, is noted in the ledgers. But his quiet approval, sustained by his position and his pay, was remembered as deeply damaging by those who survived the system.
And this constant pressure, this dehumanization, it led to more tragedies, didn't it? Like Rose's death.
Yes, Rose's story is heartbreaking. She was only 32, but she had already borne 5 children in the program. Her body was exhausted. She fell ill, likely with tuberculosis, in April 1858.
And Ruth's reaction.
Ruth, ever the meticulous manager of assets, isolated Rose immediately. Not out of concern for Rose, but out of fear of contagion spreading to the rest of her valuable stock.
So Rose died alone.
Died alone, yes.
Yeah.
And she was buried quickly, quietly, in an unmarked grave somewhere on the property edge.
An unmarked grave.
That specific detail, the unmarked grave, it fueled deep, lasting anger among the enslaved community because it just demonstrated her absolute worthlessness in the eyes of the Jessups once her reproductive utility was exhausted. She was disposable, utterly disposable, even in death.
The system was designed to exploit and destroy lives outside the family, but it seems inevitable that it would start to corrode the Jessups themselves from within.
Absolutely. And the sources show the system beginning to consume its own creators. The internal psychological toll on the Jessup children particularly was immediate and profound. It started showing with Samuel, the second son.
How so?
Samuel showed signs of distress surprisingly early. Starting around 1852, just 2 years after he began his duty at 17.
What kind of signs?
The family notes and even ledger entries reference his turning to heavy drinking, sometimes disappearing for days at a time. By 1855, he was still functional, performing his duties, but accounts describe him as visibly miserable, increasingly erratic.
But he kept participating.
He did, right up until 1858, which just shows the power of that indoctrination and probably a deep fear of his father's disapproval. The conflict was clearly tearing him apart inside.
And Margaret, the eldest daughter, her decline was different.
Yes, it manifested differently. After the birth of her 4th child in 1857, she began having what Ruth, in her diary, clinically referred to as melancholic episodes.
Depression, basically.
Almost certainly. Locking herself away for days, refusing meals. But Ruth, who was still completely committed to the economic model and viewed her daughters primarily as contributors to the production line,
She didn't show sympathy.
she treated it as a character weakness, something requiring discipline, not compassion. Margaret was absolutely not permitted to stop her participation in the system.
Was there anyone outside the family who saw what was happening? An external witness?
We actually have one very rare glimpse from an outsider, a Reverend William Foster, who was a traveling Methodist minister from Pennsylvania. He stayed overnight at the plantation in November 1858.
And he left a record.
He kept a journal, yes, and it survived. It's chilling. He noted the oppressive atmosphere, saying it went beyond the usual oppression of a southern plantation.
What else did he observe?
He remarked on the unusual number of very young children, and he noted their physical resemblance to the Jessups. He clearly realized what was happening.
He saw the truth. But he wrote that he felt helpless, you mentioned earlier. Why helpless?
It comes down to the complete supremacy of the law at the time. Slavery was legal. What the Jessups were doing, however morally reprehensible, was considered an internal management issue, protected by state statute and property rights.
So reporting it wouldn't have helped.
Reporting it locally would have almost certainly resulted in his immediate ejection from the county, maybe worse, and it would have brought absolutely no benefit, possibly even retribution, upon the enslaved people he might have wanted to help. His silence was born of a kind of profound legal paralysis. But crucially, he did document the details in his private journal.
So the pressure is building internally. What was the breaking point for Samuel?
It finally came in 1859, and it was catalyzed by another extreme act of retribution on the plantation. Hannah, remember her, the first woman paired with Thomas, along with Rachel and another woman named Julia, they attempted an escape.
And were caught.
Caught and then publicly and severely whipped. Seeing this, Samuel, reportedly drunk and completely despairing, finally confronted Isaiah directly in the study.
What happened?
He accused his father of creating a system of horror that was destroying everyone, including the Jessup family itself. Isaiah, apparently incapable of admitting any moral fault, just called Samuel weak, and according to the account, struck him.
And
Samuel couldn't take it anymore. He couldn't live within the walls of that system any longer. He rode off towards Natchez that very night and never returned. He left the plantation permanently.
He exiled himself.
Effectively, yes. And that confrontation, it just exposed the fundamental violence, both physical and psychological, that underpinned the entire family's wealth and existence.
Margaret's story, though, ended even more tragically.
Much darker and much more immediate. After being forced to continue her duties despite her deteriorating mental state, she became pregnant for the 6th time. In a desperate act in October 1859, she attempted to harm herself. She was then confined by the family, closely supervised, essentially held captive by her own parents and siblings to ensure the pregnancy continued.
Did she survive the birth?
No. She ultimately died from blood loss and complications during that forced childbirth in late July 1859. She was only 24 years old.
And this death, the death of her own daughter, surely this must have affected Ruth.
It seems Margaret's death, being one of their own, finally pierced Ruth's carefully constructed moral defenses. The Ledgers, of course, just note the cost of her expensive funeral. Another expense.
But her letters?
Her letters tell a different story. She began to wonder, quietly, if God was punishing them. She wrote to her sister around that time about having sinned greatly and fearing that God's judgment approaches.
A crack in the conviction.
A definite crack. A collapse of conviction, really. But it came far too late to save Margaret or Samuel or any of the people suffering under her family's policies for decades.
And the youngest daughter, Elizabeth. How did Margaret's death affect her?
Shockingly, it seems it barely registered on a moral level. The indoctrination proved horrifically complete with Elizabeth. She was 20 by then. Showed no signs of distress, no reflection, no guilt.
How did she interpret it?
She apparently viewed Margaret's death only as evidence of the inherent danger of childbirth for any woman, not as a consequence of their horrific system. She was the most perfectly engineered product of her parents' ideology.
And she continued.
She continued her participation without hesitation, becoming pregnant again just months after Margaret's death in September 1859. So by 1859, you can see the structural integrity of the whole Jessup enterprise was just completely compromised. Even Thomas, the eldest son still there, began to see it.
He saw the unsustainability.
Yes, but crucially, not through a moral lens. His concern, reflected in some notes, was purely pragmatic. Hostility among the enslaved population was visibly growing. Field productivity was tangibly declining.
It was becoming bad business.
Exactly. It was starting to undermine the very economic premise of the whole Jessup operation.
And then external events started to intrude more forcefully.
Right. John Brown's raid in October 1859 sent waves of fear through the slaveholding South. Isaiah reacted by tightening security dramatically, fearing an internal revolt.
But the enslaved community was already pushing back.
They were already mobilizing in quieter ways. And then came a major act of defiance. On December 18, 1859, just days before Christmas, fire broke out.
Where?
In the new cotton gin building. The very symbol of Jessup's expanded wealth, built on the profits from the breeding program.
Orson.
Deliberately set, yes. Later accounts suggest it was a coordinated act by a group of about 7 enslaved people, striking directly at the foundation of Isaiah's economic power.
How did Isaiah react?
Brutally and arbitrarily. When no one confessed under questioning, he selected 3 men, Peter, Moses, and James, completely at random.
And punished them.
Publicly whipped them 20 lashes each, and threatened continued random punishments if the perpetrators didn't come forward.
Did that work?
No, this desperate act only seemed to deepen the resolve of the enslaved community. The ledgers actually show, indirectly, a rapid acceleration of active sabotage in the following months.
Like what?
More missing tools reported. Complaints about contaminated seed corn. Damaged fences needing constant repair. The plantation had effectively become a slow-motion war zone. Passive resistance shifted to active sabotage.
And all this is happening as the country is sliding towards civil war? How did Isaiah process that?
It seems he remained profoundly blind to the concrete evil and destruction happening right there on his own land. He became entirely consumed with the abstract political defense of the institution.
States' rights, property rights.
Exactly. Attending meetings in Woodville, giving passionate speeches about those things. He was defending the idea of slavery, while the physical reality of his own personal system was literally disintegrating around him.
And then the war itself arrived.
The war, of course, systematically dismantled the dynasty he had so meticulously, brutally built. Thomas, the eldest, enlisted in the Confederate forces.
What happened to him?
He was killed at the Battle of Shiloh in April 1862.
And Daniel, the youngest son?
Daniel died of dysentery while serving with the Confederate Army in Virginia in 1863.
So both sons involved in the system died in the war.
Both died defending the Confederacy. And Ruth, broken by the loss of her sons and likely weighed down by that late-blooming guilt, she died in her sleep in August 1864. The family's horrific genetic investment was wiped out by the very conflict they sought to uphold.
Leaving only Isaiah and Elizabeth.
Isaiah, in rapidly failing health by then, was left only with Elizabeth, the perfectly indoctrinated daughter. When Union troops finally arrived in Wilkinson County in April and May of 1865, the world he had built just disappeared overnight.
How did he react to emancipation?
Sources say Isaiah, confined to a wheelchair by then, struggled to even comprehend the concept. It just didn't compute with his lifelong worldview.
And Elizabeth?
Elizabeth, the perfect product of his system, she refused to accept the loss of property. She actually demanded compensation from the Union officer who arrived, citing the investment value of the labor force that was now walking away.
Unbelievable. And the people who had been enslaved?
They knew freedom had arrived. They gathered their few belongings and scattered. Hannah, remember, the very first woman forced into the program with Thomas. She left immediately and headed north towards Memphis. Julia, the one whipped after the escape attempt, was described as psychologically brought in and was eventually taken in by a freedmen's bureau camp. The Jessup Empire just evaporated.
So what happened to the remaining Jessups? The dynasty clearly collapsed.
The family legacy just faded quickly into economic ruin and obscurity. Isaiah died in October 1865, just months after emancipation, completely unable to adapt to a world where his account books no longer held ultimate power.
And Samuel, the son who fled?
Samuel died of liver failure, likely from his alcoholism, in 1872. He died estranged from his family, living under an assumed name somewhere else.
And Elizabeth, the last one?
Elizabeth sold the dilapidated plantation in 1867 for just a fraction of its former value. She moved away and died in Mobile, Alabama in 1891. She never married. The direct line ended.
The physical place decayed, but the evidence didn't disappear. How did the ledgers survive?
By sheer historical chance, really. The Jessup Ledgers, these crucial documents, were discovered locked away in an old trunk in 1962.
Found by whom?
By a distant descendant of Ruth's sister, someone clearing out old family storage. Shocked by the contents, this descendant did the morally correct thing and donated them to a university archive for preservation and study.
And that's what makes this case so powerful, right? The documentation.
Exactly. What makes it so vital for historians and so horrifically verifiable is that confluence of evidence. You have a ledgers providing the chilling internal calculations.
But corroborated by external sources.
Fully corroborated by the journal notes of Reverend Foster, that traveling minister, and perhaps most importantly, by the oral histories collected by the Federal Writers Project back in the 1930s, interviewing elderly, formerly enslaved people.
Is there a specific quote from those histories that stands out?
There's one testimony from a woman named Patience. She was born in 1854, so she was product of the program. Interviewed in her old age, she said, simply, "We wasn't people to them. We was crops they was growing."
Wow. Crops they was growing. That just perfectly summarizes the economic framework Isaiah built.
It really does. And now, in recent years, we have DNA testing providing the final, undeniable scientific verification.
Confirming the ledger entries.
Confirming genetic links between living individuals descended from the enslaved population on that plantation and living individuals descended from the Jessup family line. The science matches the horrific pairings noted in those meticulous ledgers.
And the most chilling legal reality here
is that Isaiah Jessup was never charged with a crime, he was never investigated, he was never held legally accountable for the systematic sexual violence and forced reproduction he orchestrated and managed for decades.
Because the system allowed it?
The legal, economic, and social system of the antebellum South was explicitly designed to permit, even protect, this industrial scale of systemic dehumanization. It wasn't illegal.
How many children did the ledgers record from this program?
According to Isaiah's own precise records, the ledgers document at least 47 children born directly from the breeding program between roughly 1848 and 1865.
And how many survived to see freedom?
Based on the records, approximately 30 of those children survived to see emancipation. Their descendants now number in the hundreds, possibly thousands, all connected back to this single documented system through those ledgers and now through DNA.
So the Jessup case serves as this essential, deeply disturbing example.
Of systemic evil operating perfectly efficiently as good business under the full protection of the law. It demonstrates just how readily moral blindness can occur when it's entirely supported, even optimized, by a powerful economic framework.
We've spent this deep dive unpacking the calculation, the system, the profound psychological damage, and ultimately the documented collapse of the Jessup breeding program, all guided by the chilling precision of those ledgers and the painful testimony of the survivors.
It's a stark reminder of how dehumanization can be systematized when profit is the primary motive.
So for you listening, what's the key takeaway here?
I think the Jessup case forces us to confront how easily business as usual can mask profound moral failings, especially when sanctioned by law and societal norms. It's a warning about the seductive power of economic rationalization.
And it leaves us with a really provocative thought, doesn't it?
It does. We know the descendants of the enslaved population from Jessup Plantation and the descendants of the Jessup family themselves are now connected, linked by these records, by DNA.
When the architects of such profound trauma, like Isaiah and Ruth, refused to ever acknowledge the moral cost when they died, believing them were just victims of economic forces, not perpetrators of horrific violence, how does that inherited silence, that lack of accountability, shape the generations that follow?
And how much responsibility does society, past and present, bear for actions that were deliberately made legal, even encouraged by the state itself? That's the heavy question these ledgers leave us